Miss Miles, and today we're going to be talking about collages. So let's start with the first slide. If you guys can pull up collage history. What is a collage? A collage may sometimes include magazines and newspaper clippings, ribbons, paint, bits of colored or handmade papers, portions of other artworks or text, photographs, and other found objects glued to a piece of paper or canvas. Now, what is a found object? Well, a found object is something that you just simply find and add to your artwork. So, if I made a collage and I just so happened to walk by a leaf and I was like, ooh, this seems like it can go pretty good with my collage, then the leaf will be my found object. Okay? The history of collage can be traced back hundreds of years, but this technique made a dramatic reappearance in the early 20th century. Cubism. I know what you guys are thinking. I thought we were learning about collage. Well, artists who started the movement, George Braque and Pablo Picasso, also created collages in this style. Their art was made by fractured forms and deconstructed distorted subject matter. Cubism has the same style as collage because it allowed artists to piece together a picture from different medias and textures in text. I want to go over a few vocabulary words in this slide, and I also have a word bank at the end of the slide if you don't understand some of the words that I used. Deconstructed is when you take something apart. So Pablo Picasso and Braque, they use a lot of three-dimensional objects and kind of broke them apart. Like if you look at some of their artwork, you can see how it looked like it used to be something that it was three-dimensional that they broke apart. So distorted is when something, is pulled or twisted out of shape. So if you see some of their shapes that are supposed to be maybe a triangle, but it looks like it's kind of pulled and stretched out of shape. And fractured simply just means broken. I don't know if you guys ever sprained something or broke your elbow and they say it was fractured. Okay, well they use that term in art too. You can take a piece of paper and rip it or cut it and make it appear like the face is fractured of something, or a vase is fractured, and so forth. What collage techniques do you see in this next slide with the Three Musicians by Pablo Picasso? And I have like 4 more questions for you guys. You guys could just sit there and think to yourselves for 15 seconds about the question. Why do you think he called it Three Musicians? What shapes do you see? What colors did he use? And what movement do you see? Just take some time and just think about those. Okay. So the first question, why do you think he called it Three Musicians? Well, if you look at the artwork, you'll see that it's 3 figures that they're holding 3 different instruments. What shapes do you see? Well, I see plenty of geometric shapes. I see a lot of rectangles and a couple of circles. And I also see that some of these geometric shapes have been distorted. Remember I gave you a definition of what distorted means? When something is pulled and stretched. So if you look at some of these figures, they look like they've been pulled and stretched to create a sort of a movement in the picture. Because if he had musicians that were just standing straight up holding their instruments, would it look like they're playing their instruments? No, so he wanted to move their heads a little bit, stretch it out, make it seem like they were jamming to their music. So the colors are very important too. Colors are very important in our artwork and what colors we choose because they go along with our subject matter and the theme of our piece. So he used a lot of oranges and browns and yellows, and those are warm colors. So he wanted to give a very warm feel to the piece. And he also added a cool color to balance it out. And this gives a very chill, relaxed, jazzy blues vibe. And we already went over the movement. The movement, you see them playing the instruments with their heads moving. Also, if you look closely to the picture, if you kind of squint your eyes, the entire picture is a square. So it makes the square movement. So you're doing this with your eyes around the picture the entire time. Okay? So let's talk about the Dada movement. Dadaists also began to experiment with collage in the 1920s. Unlike the Cubists, who love still life arrangements, which are, we seen their instruments aren't alive, right? So the Dadaists, they did something totally different. They created collages that used a wide variety of visual images, from reinterpreted portraits to figures rooted in fantasy. And we know what fantasy means. Fantasy just means dreamlike. You know, the artists back in the day, they wanted to kind of change the definition of art. They wanted to do things that were different, because all the rest of the artists, they were doing things that were look more so realistic. So they wanted to tap into their fantasy and collages and cubism and abstraction, because some of those artists couldn't draw, honestly. So they wanted to do something different. They wanted to be a part of the art world, but they didn't want to do the same thing that everyone else was doing. Okay, so let's look at this artwork right here called The Observer. I have a question for you. Is why do you think the artist titled this The Observer? And we have a couple of context clues in this piece already. And just take 15 seconds out, just staring at the picture, and tell us what it means to you. So this is my definition. When I'm looking at the artwork, I see these big letters that say The Observer. So that's the first hint of why this artwork is called The Observer. You have it down in the corner, really huge, and observe means to look. So that gives me another idea of why this piece is called The Observer, because I see a whole bunch of eyes inside of this piece. So this artist really created a great balance in her artwork, because not only did she have the word observe, but she also had the action with the eyes to look. So that also created some movement in the piece as well. So in your personal work, when you do your collages, it's okay to drop hints and treasures to make other people think about what's going on in your artwork, because that's very important. Think about not only what you want to create, but what do you want other people to see, okay? And let's just go back over some of these definitions, these vocabulary words that we've seen in this slide. So the first one is media. Media is the art technique or material that you use to express your art. So if you're using a newspaper or a canvas or anything, that is the media that you're going to use. What is a mixed media? Well, a mixed media is a visual art form that combines a variety of media in a single work. So you can use a newspaper, you can use a Sharpie, a crayon, put a little bit of paint in there, and there you go, you have a mixed media piece. So let's talk about movement and rhythm. Sometimes movement and rhythm can get very tricky, because it's a lot of ways you can spot out movement and rhythm inside of artwork. So movement is the path the viewer eyes take through a work of art. I told you about that earlier when I was telling you about the three musicians, how it forms a big square, and I just go in a square when I'm my eyes go in the shape of a square when I look at the piece. Movement can be directed along lines, edges, shapes, and color. So Let's talk about the three musicians one more time. To make our eyes move, Pablo Picasso put the blue up here and put a little blue down here so our eyes can just bounce up and down the picture, okay? Rhythm is created when one or more elements are used repeatedly to create a feeling of movement. And remember, I just told you about the color blue. He used it repeatedly so our eyes can wander back and forth. Texture. This is very important because we don't have to use magazines and other things. We can also use texture in our collages. So a collage is the feel or the appearance of something. So if you look at this right here, you see this texture on the corners. You get a very jagged texture, okay? Deconstruction, we already talked about that, but we can talk about it again, is to take something apart that was built. Distorted is pulled or twisted out of shape. Fractured is broken or cracked. Thank you guys for listening. I can't wait to start on our projects.